Welcome to Paradigms at paradigms.life, the radio show and podcast that brings you inspiring people with visions of a viable future for life on Earth that includes humans. Hi, I'm Baruch, host of Paradigms. Thanks for listening. Glad to be with you, bringing you a wonderful guest. He is a jazz guitarist, and he's a New York working musician. He's going to tell us a bit about how he got started and his most recent record, just good music. So let's meet my guest now on this episode of Paradigms. Oz Noy, welcome to Paradigms.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
You've got a new record out called Triple Play with some other really great musicians, and I've been listening to it, and it's lovely to hear some blues, and you really do some different stuff with it. And before we talk about the music, I'd just like to learn a bit about you as a person, your story, how you found yourself becoming this person, this musician. I know you started at an early age. Like, what's a bit of your story?
I started playing guitar when I was 10. I actually wanted to play drums. Somehow, I don't know why, I went to friends of mine was studying guitar, so I went to his teacher. And I don't even remember liking it or anything, but I just kept going, and that was that. And I got professional in a really young age. So growing up in Israel, by the age of 13, 14, I would already start kind of working as a musician, a little bit, but doing recordings. Then at age of 15, I was already playing with some semi-established, artists there.
Wow.
So that's pretty much my whole life is just playing, And then around 18 till 24, when I moved to New York, I was a working musician in Israel. I did a lot of, recordings, shows, TV shows, everything, So that's pretty much it. And practicing guitar through the whole time,
It's always interesting to me when people start as a child, how does that shape your life, right? The people you meet, the experiences you have, the places you go.
It's interesting, yeah. Again, I'm from Israel, so I guess each country is kind of it's got its own situation. But at the time when I was growing up in the 80s, I was able to work as a musician there in a young age because the level wasn't that high. Now it's much higher. So I was lucky in that sense. So when I moved to New York when I was 24, I was already kind of professional. I can go in and play with people and not embarrass myself too much. That was kind of a big thing. And each country I think it works different depending on where you grow up. But I was kind of lucky in that sense. You know what I mean? So, and that's all I've done my whole life, except of picking oranges for one day during the Gulf War. Other than that, my whole life, the only thing I've done ever was just playing guitar. It's great.
And we don't have to go there if you don't want to, but I want to ask you, what was it like growing up in Israel during that time? There's this ongoing conflict. There's the horror of what's going on right now. I have visited Israel, and I have hung out with people near Gaza and been out in the desert at night and heard helicopters and bombs. This was like 15 years ago. So my Israeli friends were like, oh, we're used to this. I was horrified and felt like I have to stop and honor the fact that people are losing their lives right now. Whatever side one takes, or maybe some people take no sides and just take the human side. That's kind of more my position. But for you as a young person growing up in a country that was in ongoing conflict, regardless of the ideology, how did that affect you?
When you grow up into a situation, it doesn't affect you. You're just that person that is in that situation, So in terms of affecting me today, I don't know. It's like you grow up with this stuff as a part of the culture, unfortunately. And it's a horrible reality sometimes. And, you just deal with it because that's what you know. You go play guitar one day and the next day they cancel your gig because there was a terrorist attack. It's just a part of, how life is. And growing up, I haven't been living in Israel for almost 30 years, you know what I mean? So I'm very, all my family's there. I'm following what's going on, and, I'm not like disconnected, but not living there for that long, it doesn't change your perspective, but you don't feel it the way people that live there feel it. Like, it's actually when I see things from here, from New York, it's actually more freaky than when I'm actually there experiencing them, because you're from the outside, you go like, oh my God, this looks horrible. And when you're on the inside, it's still horrible, but not on the same level, you know, because there's some kind of routine to the life in Israel, and it just keeps going. I don't know.
I'm talking with Oz Noy about his new record, Triple Play, and about his musical career. We'll be back with more conversation, but let's hear something from Triple Play. This one's called Groovin Grant, Oz Noy Trio, featuring Dennis Chambers and Jimmy Haslip. You're listening to Paradigms at paradigms.life. Groovin Grant. That's Oz Noy Trio from their new record, Triple Play. And now let's get back to my conversation with Oz Noy.
So you play blues guitar, and blues is the blues. It has this whole history.
I'm basically a jazz player that mixes blues and other things into my playing, because I don't consider myself a blues player at all.
Okay.
If anything, I'm a jazz player that mixes blues and other music into it. I love the blues. It's great, but I can't call myself a blues player with respect to the greats. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Well, so how did you come to bring blues into jazz? I mean, not that that's an unheard of combination, but for you, what drives your thing?
Well, as a student, I always liked a lot of different styles of music. And when I went to this teacher in Israel, because I wanted to kind of play more modern jazz, and I was playing rock and all that kind of stuff. And he says, like, okay, if you want to learn jazz, you need to learn the language of jazz, which is bebop. So I got into that for a while. And then in the same time, I was always playing rock. At some point, I got into Stevie Ray Vaughan and people like that. And I realized that it's the same idea. In order to kind of play blues, you have to learn the language of the blues, which is, like the older guys that played it. So I kind of somehow was doing both, you know what I mean? Because I don't know, it just kind of what led me to both things at the time, late 80s or whatever. So when I have students, I always tell them that if you learn bebop and blues, you're never going to lose, because that's kind of like the essence of a lot of the music that at least I'm playing. Like, it's the essence of modern jazz, the essence of rock. All the guys that are really good rock players are guys normally that can play really good blues. So to me, blues and bebop are like the kind of like the bread and butter of music, especially improvised music. So that's, for me, what kind of glues everything together. And all the jazz greats, like, you have to have the blues to sound good, So it's some kind of a common, how do you call it? Common denominator, for in music. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you kind of never lose with the blues in a way. I don't know. Again, I'm not a blues player. I love it, and I try it as much as I can, but I focus most of my life more on jazz, you know what I mean? So mixing it together is not a problem for me, because it was almost like one thing. Later in my career, when I made those two albums that were called Twisted Blues Volume 1 and Twisted Blues Volume 2, and those albums, I actually really went for it, meaning I took all these different blues forms because I love playing blues or bluesy stuff, and I put jazz harmony on that. So that was a big thing for me to I found like the glue that worked for me really well,
Mm-hmm. And obviously, you've studied music. You aren't just self-taught.
Yeah.
And this is more for listeners who are curious. How important is it to study music, in your view?
I never went to university. I went to a couple of private teachers, and the rest of it was street learning, meaning, playing in New York and talking to people and stuff like that. If it was up to me, I would have gone to a music school. I teach at Berkeley now, and I never went to university. I never have a degree or anything, but I found that there's a lot of great benefits for going to university. If I could have done it now, I would have done it, because I think I have certain holes in my musical knowledge that I would have loved to kind of fill,
Interesting.
So I like it. Some people do okay with being self-taught. I don't know. It's a very specific personality and talent that you have to have in order to do that, It's very personal, I think. I don't think one thing is better and one thing is worse. It's just like a personal thing. Yeah.
And who are some of your favorites? Who inspires you?
Oh, my God, everybody. I always like, if it comes to blues, then the blues greats, like, B.B. King, Albert King, Freddie King, Stevie Ray Vaughan, blah, 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 Hendrix, Clapton. When it comes to rock, then those guys, and also, Eric Johnson, Jeff Beck, it's endless. I don't know, Steve Vai, Van Halen. And then when it comes to jazz, there's like, I don't know where to start even, Charlie Parker, Bud Powell, Wes Montgomery, Pat Metheny, I don't know, John Scofield. I don't know, Kurt Rosenwinkel. It's like, it's endless, you know, there's so many. And I really love classical guitar. I'm the worst classical guitar player in the world, but I really love it. So to me, you know, Andre Segovia and Julian Bream and like John Williams are like the top of the mountain, you know what I mean? Like, and also in the same sense, like Paco de Lucia and, you know, so I'm just trying to be open to this kind of stuff.
Gosh, I haven't heard Julian Bream's name in so many years.
Oh, he's my favorite. He's absolutely my favorite.
You grew up listening to him and
Oh,
Segovia.
Yeah, untouchable.
We'll be back with more of my conversation with Oz Noy after we hear some more from his album Triple Play. This one's called Boom Boo Boom. hear the blues in that. There's definitely a tribute to Stevie Ray Vaughan in there. All right, let's get back now to my conversation with Oz Noy.
So this new record, Triple Play, it's great. It's got a lot of wonderful, it's instrumental music. You can really put it on and groove to it. You've got wonderful accompanists. And if I am correct in understanding your liner notes, this was recorded as a live album.
Yes. As a touring musician, I do a couple of tours a year with my band. So it started before the pandemic, then it stopped. The band that I've been touring with is the Jimmy Haslip, bassist, and Dennis Chambers, drummer. Usually when you're on tour, things starts to really gel nicely because you play every night, sometimes for a couple of weeks, so it's really, like your chops are really up and everybody's connecting and you don't have to even look at anybody. It's just like you play and it's there, It's kind of like, it's almost like it's like a human connection. You get this deep connection with musician, with like somebody. It's like it becomes your best friend, musically, you know what I mean? It's so interesting.
Yeah.
So we finished a tour in Europe at the end of 2022. And I told the guys, I kind of forced them a little bit. I was like, hey, it sounds pretty hot now. Let's record it before it goes away, because usually you let it go, you do another tour, it takes a minute for it to come back and it comes back different, So they agreed and then we went to a place called Stages Music Arts. It's an amazing facility in Baltimore, Coxville, actually. It's actually a music school and that's connected to some fancy studios. So they had this top-of-the-line studios there and they had a performer space there. So we did 2 nights there and played a couple of shows and recorded them. And then that's the live album. Because I've done a lot of studio albums, but I wanted to do a live album that would present this band because we were on tour. And I wanted to capture that before, that sound of this band before it kind of goes away, really.
Yeah, because nothing stays the same.
Now, my music, I consider it to be jazz. It's improvised music. It's very hard to capture something that happened even last night, you know what I mean? But you're kind of still in that zone, then you get close, But if you kind of stop and then you start again, it's not that it's going to be bad. It's just going to be different, And sometimes it might take a minute for it to get back to where it was, And it doesn't matter who you're playing with. It doesn't matter the level of musician. It's just human nature. I don't know.
I'm curious about the improv aspect. Do you start out with a basic theme, with some basic charts?
Yes. Yeah.
And then you all just sort of go for it.
The way I write, again, it's all based on jazz forms, but I write the tunes that to me are like kind of jazz, kind of like standard. So I write a tune, and then after the melody or the theme of the tune, there's a lot of areas where you can improvise. And that's most of the record is improvising on those forms, And then there's a lot of different kind of ways of improvising. Some ways it's just kind of open. There's a little vamp and you kind of go for it. Some sections are more like the form of the actual composition, and there's ups and downs and, it's basically jazz. It's what jazz improvisation is,
Mm-hmm.
There's different ways of doing it, obviously.
And so when the 3 of you are playing together and you have this basic theme that you're all really familiar with, and then you're going to go off with it.
Yeah.
How are you relating with each other?
Everybody has to know the composition and the form. Once everybody knows the form, and the form also means what the groove of the song is stylistically and stuff. But once that's there, there's not much talking or even looking at each other. You don't need to, because everybody knows the language of improvising over this kind of music. So you just play. And because I know the language that fits the music that I want to play, the drummer knows it, the bass player knows it, we don't look at each other. There's nothing really to communicate. We play. It's all in the head,
Yep, you're listening to each other.
Sometimes you can play half a set. I can play half a set without even looking at it, and like the bass player or the drummer, just because it's not necessary. We're in the music,
For people who don't play music, hopefully they have something else that takes them into that similar kind of zone. But there is this amorphous, magical place that you go to with creativity that's just beyond measure, beyond words, requires no explanation, and it just has a feeling of flow to it.
you have to learn the skills. It's skills that you have to learn. So it doesn't come out of the air. You know what I mean? Like it's a very serious skill, and you work on it your whole life. So the skills, people go to music schools to get those skills. The skill to play in time, to play different rhythms, to play different scales, different colors, different everything. So you learn those skills, and once you have those skills, the greats have those skills in like an extreme level, you know what I mean? So once you have those skills, you kind of talk the same language, and only when you have those skills you can talk that language. Before that you can't. But what I found interesting is, and this is something I'm really proud of in my life, is that I got really lucky when I moved to New York, where I was able to play with the same group of people for many, many, many years, because I had a steady gig here, or steady gigs here. So between the steady gigs that I have in New York and touring, you end up playing with a bunch of guys. It's not like 2-3 guys. Sometimes it can be like 4 or 5, on different periods. But when you play with them a lot, like you spend a lot of time with them and you play with them a lot. And the thing that's amazing is I can not see those guys for like 2 years, and then we'll play a gig and it will be just like we played yesterday. And that's an amazing kind of feeling, That's something that I really love. That it's almost like it's this relationship that you develop, but on a different kind of level, And that's pretty awesome. That's kind of worth living for you.
Oz is a musician's musician. He is just a working guy, and that's his gig, and he's really good at it. Here's another track from Oz Noy Trio. This one's called Snapdragon. This is Paradigms at paradigms.life. Snapdragon from the Oz Noy Trio, their new record, Triple Play. And now here's the next part of my conversation with Oz Noy.
You play music a lot. You probably practice every day. You gig often, it sounds like. But what else is there that feeds you? Or is music it? Like, are you one of those people who that is just all there is?
I don't think that's all there is, but I don't. When you ask me now, like, what else do I do in life? I just play. There's so much to do. Like, I don't even scratch the surface. You know what I mean? Like, of what can be done. You know, and also living in New York, you gotta work. You know, so
Yeah.
So you can't just sit at home like practice guitar and watch TV. You know, you gotta do gigs, you gotta do recordings or anything. You gotta write, you gotta do everything. But I love it. I have no problem doing it. I'm actually one of those guys that don't really have a problem even doing a gig or something that's not that good. Some people kind of get really dark on it, but obviously if it pays, I mean, not as for fun, you know. But as a job, you know, I like it. I can imagine doing something else, you know?
Yeah, well, you're your own boss.
Exactly, yeah. Well, sometimes you're not, but yeah, in my case, a lot of times I am, but yeah.
This trio, I mean, it's always amazing to me how you can have a trio and the sound is so full. It sounds like there's 10 instruments playing,
Yeah.
you know, because when people are playing together like you three do, there's this synergy. And so it's like when you're in a drum circle, like you may have 5 drummers, but there's the 6th drummer, you know, the invisible one that comes in. But I'm curious about different forms that intrigue you. Like this is a trio, but you just said you play with more people. How is that for you different?
I'm mostly, let's say, known for playing a guitar trio in a specific kind of style. Because it's a trio, there's a lot of space, sonic space, you know what I mean? Because there's no 20 horn players or strings or keyboards. There's a lot of space in the music. So when you play a trio, the harmonic and melodic instruments, which is me, have a lot of sound space, you know, to fill. So that's kind of cool because then I can use a lot of effects and different things to kind of fill that out. For bass and drums, it's different because bass is just bass. It's low end. Drums, as much as drummers can sound different, it's, you know, it's got a certain kind of function in the group, you know, and drum sound are important. Bass sound is important, but those guys, like, you know, Dennis Chambers, Jimmy Haslip, those are really, really good players. So they have a really big sound. It fills out the room. It's like you feel it, you know what I mean? So between the three of us, it sounds pretty big, you know, like it fills out the room, it fills an album, you know, there's not much else you need, but it works for a certain specific type of music that I write. Sometimes I do other projects or other things where, you know, for example, I can play an organ trio or instead of bass, I'll have an organ and that changes the sound of the band completely. Changing a drummer to a different kind of drummer, maybe a more jazzy drummer, changed the sound of the band completely. Sometimes I do a jazz quartet, so I like to do a quartet with piano. So that, again, that's playing different music, and it's different type of players. It's upright bass, piano, guitar, drummer that is, you know, a little more of a jazz drummer. All that stuff has it's got a big effect on sonically on how it sounds, you know. I like that stuff. I don't do big groups, although on my albums I did have horns and some strings and stuff, but that's added later. But most of the stuff that I do live, like all the stuff that I do live, it's either trio or quartet of different forms, you know what I mean? Like either guitar, bass, drums, or organ, guitar, drums, or if it's a jazz quartet, it's normally piano, upright bass, guitar, drums.
And what are you working on now?
I'm about to record a jazz album in a couple months for Crisscross Records because more straight ahead, which I'm really excited about. So that's kind of the next thing. There's a couple other things, you know, brewing, but this is the next thing that I'm about to do.
We'll be back with the final part of my conversation with Oz Noy of the Oz Noy Trio after we hear this track from their new record, Triple Play. It's called Twice in a While. That's the Oz Noy Trio from their new record Triple Play, and that track is called Twice in a While. Very ethereal. All right, here's the final part of my conversation with Oz Noy.
I've taught not music, other things, and it's so incredibly gratifying when students are enthusiastic and excited about what they're learning.
I like teaching. I don't love teaching. You know what I mean? Like but it's interesting to see because I have students coming to me all the time, but it's mostly kind of one-off or two, like because they come for specific things, you know. So there's a lot that people come in, but I don't see their progress. I just go like, hey, this is what I think you should do. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, blah, blah, blah. But with teaching in a university, you see the same person for every week for like 3 months or 4 months, whatever that is. It was interesting for me to see how some guys actually really by the end of the semester, I was like, wow, they really got to the next level, which I never really experienced that like personally like that, you know what I mean?
And when you play and you know, you're a musician, you play live for people, how much do you pay attention to what's happening in the room with the audience, or are you just in your zone?
I don't close my eyes. When I play, my eyes are open. So I look at the crowd. I don't care much for it, to be totally honest. I don't care if they don't enjoy it or not. It doesn't affect me in any way. If you have a full room, then you can really feel the energy because there's a lot of people. Then that makes a difference to me than if there's a room with like few people. But in terms of how people connect with me or how they feel, I just do what I do, and the rest is not up to me, you know what I mean? I just try to do what I do really well, you know? That's pretty much it. You know, I know there's a lot of people can get deep with that stuff, but at the end of the day, you know, there's musicians, like especially a studio musician, which I do, it's like a famous scenario where you come to a session and the artist or whoever is there doesn't know exactly what they want, and they go like, can you give me more pink or more green? You know what I mean? It doesn't mean anything to a musician. You know what I mean? Like you have to be getting like, there is certain kind of like certain type of materials or tools that you have to give a certain feeling to somebody, you know? But getting too spiritual about that stuff, for me, doesn't really help me. You know what I mean? So it's the same way with, you know, when you play live or when you write, it's like, to me, it's like, okay, this is how it works. I just try to do it as best as I can.
Well, you know, you're making wonderful music. It gives people whatever it gives them. And you all are having the experience you're having. And this is life.
Exactly. Like, that's exactly what it is. It's life. That's exactly what it is. Yeah. You just live your life. Some people go work in a bank. Some people go dance. Some people, I don't know, build whatever. And I play guitar, you know.
I love it. You have no delusions of grandeur. That's for sure. Well, it's wonderful music and I appreciate it. And I grew up listening to blues and jazz. And so when I put this on, it was very sort of like, oh, this is almost familiar feeling, you know? Yeah. So I appreciate it. Well, Oz, it's great talking with you about your life and your music. And I love your very straightforward sense of yourself and what you do. It's like no BS.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, Oz, thanks a lot for talking with me. I appreciate it. And good luck with everything. And obviously, you're going to keep making this music because it's who you are.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Oz Noy, thank you so much for talking with me, coming on the show, sharing your music. The new record, Triple Play, is really good. It's just really good music. Sometimes we just need the music without a lot of words. This is great music to just boogie around the house to. Oz Noy Trio, the new record, Triple Play. Folks, if you'd like to know more, OzNoy.com is the website, OZNOY.com. You can learn more about Oz there. If you're looking for lessons and you're in New York, or maybe he does lessons remotely, check him out. His gigging schedule is up there and lots more. So check out Oz Noi. I've enjoyed the music on this record, Triple Play. I think it's really good, sort of down-home jazz and I think very bluesy guitar. And as we said, the amazing fullness of sound you can get from a trio. And this is a live album. This is not overdubbed. This is not worked over in the studio. Oz has a very pragmatic approach to his musical work. It's my gig. That's what I do, making the donuts. Pretty great. We all have our thing that we do in life, or things that we do. Hopefully, they're things that we enjoy. But whatever your gig is, that's what you do. You do it the best you can and put it out into the world. Whether it's making music or writing books or cooking food for people, whether you work in a shop or an office or a farm, it all has value. That's what makes up a functioning society. Everybody doing their thing with each other, for each other. So I appreciate people who make music. All right, I am going to leave you with one more track from Oz Noy Trio's new record, Triple Play. It's called Twisted Blues. And let's let the word for the week be work. You know, in his book, The Prophet, Khalil Gibran says, work is love made visible. Let's ponder that. All right, Baruch signing off for this episode of Paradigms. We'll be back next time with more inspiring people. Until then, let us make love visible through our work. And be well.
Thank you very much. Thank you for listening. Jimmy Haslip, Dennis Chambers, Oz Noi. See you next time.
You've been listening to Paradigms at paradigms.life.